So let's have a little chat here about the Year of the Griffin. Of course, the new standard format year announced, and I want to talk about what the expansions might be based on this teaser image. And later on, we're going to take a look as well at the roadmap and break down some of that. But up first here, I want to take a look at these expansions. And at a very high level, I think it's pretty obvious. One is for the Horde, that's Forged in the Barrens. Looks like the second one's going to be Alliance based. And the third one is going to be Horde versus Alliance based on the colors there kind of merging and cracking and fighting against each other. So that's been the analysis everybody's had. Like, hey, it's Horde Alliance and they're going to fight each other. But can we take it a level further than that and a little bit deeper and try to figure out exactly what these themes are? Because it's not just a Horde expansion, it's specifically the Barrens. So for expansion number 2, for the Alliance-focused version, your first instincts might be like, okay, what's an Alliance version of the Barrens? And there are a few zones that come to mind. There's nothing that's really one-to-one in my experience in World of Warcraft. Barrens was sort of unique because it was this huge zone that covered an enormous level span. The Alliance doesn't have anything quite like that. There's things like Westfall that had some of the same meme chat aspect as far as I remember because of the Dead Mines being popular for early level people in Westfall. So you could say like maybe Westfall, but it's got the exact same color palette more or less as Barrens. And Blizzard doesn't like to do that. They don't want 2 expansions in a row to feel exactly the same. Nor does this teaser image here for expansion number 2 really point towards Westfall. This looks like a much more generic Alliance sort of area, particularly to me calls out Stormwind. Stormwind is the major capital city for the Alliance, or one of them. It's very, traditionally castle-like. It's got blue and gold banners everywhere because that's what the humans are all about from a color scheme standpoint. So this just straight up looks like Stormwind. And I think Stormwind would be suitable for an expansion theme. Even though it's just one city, there's a lot going on because there are various quarters to Stormwind. There's like one for magic people. There's one for holy people. There's even a prison dungeon inside of Stormwind that alone could serve up a ton of cards as well. So between all the different things in Stormwind, I think actually that could be a pretty suitable expansion theme and would give you more than enough to have a diverse feeling but still coherent expansion that's very Alliance focused, of course. So Stormwind's like my number one guess here for expansion number 2. But in particular, I wanted to call out here the petals. There are some pink petals falling in this little teaser. And they're there for a reason, right? They don't just add stuff to these teasers for no reason. So why did they put these pink petals? And I took to Twitter and asked you guys and thought about it a little bit and did some research. And 2 major ideas here for pink petals come to mind. I was kind of looking geographically, and there's some particular areas in Pandaria, the Pandaren zones of World of Warcraft, with our panda friends, that have some pink falling petals, in particular the Jade Forest. And during that era of World of Warcraft, there was a Horde versus Alliance aspect to the Jade Forest. That was kind of how you moved to the continent and stuff. So you could see maybe an Alliance side of the story of making your way to Pandaria, and that's why there are some pink petals here. But this still doesn't really evoke the imagery of that zone. In particular, like the architecture is more Pandaren in nature. It's not like these big, iconic castle stones here we see in the background. So unless it's really merging those 2 ideas, I don't think this conveys the visual very well of Pandaria. Now, on the other hand, there's one other thing this does convey very nicely, which is the cinematic in which Arthas kills his father in the city of Lordaeron, which then becomes the Undercity where the undead live in World of Warcraft proper. And it was an Alliance city and had this same kind of iconic castle look. Blue and gold certainly could be found there. And the cinematic where Arthas kills him, there's these pink petals falling out of the sky. So this could be hearkening back to that very iconic cinematic and moment. And maybe it's something to do with Lordaeron or Arthas instead of just being a Stormwind expansion, and perhaps that's why the pink petals are there. So then moving over to expansion number 3, this one is very, very much pointing towards Alterac Valley, which, if you don't know, was a classic PvP zone or instance where Horde and Alliance would fight it out in these huge armies. It was basically a 40 versus 40, if I remember right, PvP scenarios. It was like kind of the ultimate thing. It would just be going on all day. You'd be hopping in for a couple hours sometimes just during your gameplay session. You'd see a guy in there in the morning. You'd come back late at night. The same dude would still be grinding Alterac Valley in the same fight, because sometimes it would take a really long time to resolve itself. So if you were a PvPer at all in classic World of Warcraft, vanilla World of Warcraft, then Alterac Valley was definitely maybe not the most efficient way to play all the time, but a fun one, particularly if your servers were particularly competitive across Horde and Alliance. So that would be a great way to capture that Horde versus Alliance iconic battle. Alterac Valley summed that up perfectly, and there's a lot of cool stuff you could play towards there. And I have this really, really sneaky suspicion, I guess, where Ixar tweeted recently, and I'll try to put this on screen if I could find it, but essentially in one of his AMAs, he mentioned like trying to do something weird as far as a UI was concerned, and he talked about getting in a vehicle and having like some buttons on it and stuff, which makes me think of PvP raid vehicles. So there were not in Alterac Valley that I remember any PvP raid vehicles, but in a similarly themed PvP zone in Northrend called Wintergrasp, there were vehicles that you could take control of and utilize. So maybe Alterac Valley's too obvious. Maybe instead this is Wintergrasp, and we're heading to Northrend based on the sort of Arthas storyline, perhaps, that's being told with Lordaeron in Expansion 2. Maybe that continues through somehow to Expansion 3 with the Lich King and Northrend, and it's all about Wintergrasp. And that's why we have these raid vehicle ideas that I guess got thrown away. It wasn't something I ended up utilizing. But nonetheless, maybe that's what Ixar was referencing, this idea of a raid vehicle trying to be captured via the UI in Hearthstone. So then I'd also like to propose another potential alternative for expansion number 3, even though I really think it's Alterac Valley. It could be perhaps like a raid of Ironforge. Ironforge, another major city for the Alliance, and set in a snowy zone. Maybe the Horde is going to attack Ironforge and we see it unfold there. Or maybe it's just like all the capital cities. Maybe the Alliance attack Orgrimmar, and this is just one part of that being conveyed. But Ironforge could be another aspect here in a snowy zone that, you know, might be a new story that's ripe for the telling here, where the Horde and the Alliance battle it out in the snowy scene, trying to take over Ironforge, for instance. So I don't think that's very likely, but perhaps a possibility. So listen, my best guess is still a Stormwind expansion for expansion number 2, and Alterac Valley for number 3. I think those are the most obvious, easy to work with sort of ideas for these expansions, and perhaps the most like nostalgic and powerful for players too, who have memories of these places. So I think we'll probably head to Stormwind, and I think we'll probably head to Alterac Valley, and I think that'd be awesome. That'd be great for me. But I wanted to explore some alternatives and possibilities, so don't be shocked if maybe we're going to Lordaeron instead, and maybe this isn't Alterac Valley. Maybe there's something else going on here in this underlying storyline. So what do you guys think? Which expansion are you most pumped about? Is it absolutely for sure going to be Alterac Valley? Is there some other consideration I didn't even think of that might be explained in these 2 images? I want to hear all your theories down below in the comments. But before you go, I wanted to take a look at one other year of the Griffin aspect here, which is the roadmap that was released. You probably already saw this. There's not a ton to break down here, but a couple interesting elements. Now, really for Phase 2 and Phase 3, pretty much everything there is what we would expect in a given expansion cycle. So basically, cards come out, mini sets are now going to be part of every expansion, Battlegrounds updates, Duels updates, some kind of event, some kind of solo stuff, of course, new Tavern Brawls, and balance passes. Those are normal. That's everything in Phase 2. I mean, it's cool, it's a lot of stuff, we now have a lot of things happening in Hearthstone regularly, but nothing surprising there. Phase 3 does have one additional spell locked element. We have no idea what that might be. Phase 1, on the other hand, has a ton of stuff, and that's why I'm on this side of the screen over here instead of over there. Phase 1, on top of all the normal things and the set rotation, of course, we've also got the new core set coming. We already know about that. Classic format's coming as well. And the game mode Mercenaries has been moved to Phase 1. Now, there was some confusion here when you looked back at the previous year's roadmap. The new game mode was teased to come out in the Dark Moon Fair expansion cycle. And they're now saying that that's classic format, but I think that's kind of a cover-up. I think probably Mercenaries just had a little bit too much depth and got a little out of hand, particularly in the pandemic era. And they pushed it back a little bit in the schedule because classic format is not a mode, it's a format. And there's even a tweet of Celestalon saying classic format is not the new mode. So I'm sure it's just a scheduling thing and Mercenaries wasn't quite ready or isn't done or they're working out bugs or whatever. So no big deal. I'd rather the game mode be great and delayed. I'm not complaining. But just a little bit of a discrepancy there. We were expecting the game mode for Dark Moon Fair. It sounds like it's actually going to come out somewhere later in Phase 1, which would be in the Forged and the Barrens expansion cycle. I'm guessing something like May or June for Mercenaries, as opposed to maybe like next week is what I originally was thinking when we'd see the new game mode. So still exciting and interesting. And we're going to talk a lot more about Mercenaries, by the way, in a future video, so stay tuned for that. There's also one spell locked aspect here for Phase 1, which I don't know what exactly that is either. So something new and interesting, perhaps. You would think with everything else happening in Phase 1, what could possibly be spell locked at this rate? But we don't know. We don't know. So stay tuned for that one. So unfortunately, this year looks a little front heavy. Like a lot of the cool stuff is happening early in the year as opposed to late in the year. Maybe that'll change. Maybe more will come. Maybe that spell locked thing in Phase 3 is something super awesome. It was last year. I felt like it was maybe a little bit more spread out, all the cool stuff they got. But that cool stuff is persisting at least, right? Those game modes are still there. The mini sets are happening. So I think it'll still be a lot of fun throughout the course of the year, even if there's nothing super extra happening later on. So that said, what do you guys think about the format? What do you think about Mercenaries? And what are you most excited for on this list? And do you think mini sets are a good thing or a bad thing? I'm still pro mini set, but I'm curious to hear more opinions on that matter. That said, that's it for this video. It's the year of the Griffin, expansions, roadmap, etc. Share all your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much, as always, for watching. And until next time, game on.